Hey guys, thanks for listening to this episode. Just wanted to remind everyone, if you like this episode of the podcast, make sure to give it a 5-star rating and review on iTunes. Also, share it with a friend who you think might enjoy it. And don't be shy. Reach out to me on social media, The Peaceful Way on Facebook or at Way Peaceful on Twitter. And if you want to support the show in any way, head on over to patreon.com/The Peaceful Way. You can help out for as little as $1 a month. All right, enjoy my conversation with Craig Harguess. Hey folks, we're back here with the Peaceful Way podcast. I am with a very special guest today, Craig. How do you say your last name?
Harguess.
Harguess. Craig Harguess of the Bad Roman podcast. How's it going, Craig?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
Oh, not too bad. So I think this episode I'm going to do might deviate a little bit from some of my previous episodes. We're going to get into some topics I have wanted to get into on the podcast, and that's more of like the Christianity and theological stuff, which I haven't really touched on. But so if that's not your jam, if you're one of the regular listeners, maybe this episode isn't for you. That's fine. But I know there are a few listeners who are of the Christian persuasion. And so maybe they would be interested in hearing Craig's take on things. But anyways, Craig, what is the Bad Roman podcast?
Well, it's we started the project itself started basically out of frustration on our end. We were noticing, and it had been going on for years, of course, but the growing entanglement of Christians with the state. And it seemed to be getting worse and worse with every election, and Christians were just getting involved with it. And while you're seeing this go on, you're also seeing how Christians are treating other people when they're involved with politics, and that's another thing that was really frustrating to me. Now, full disclosure, I was the same way back in the day. I was a full-blown neocon back in the early 2000s, and I was online arguing with people and being mean to people the way we see in politics these days. And as Christians, we're not supposed to be behaving that way anyway. Jesus was very, very frank when he said to love your neighbor. There's nothing about loving your neighbor that says, I'm going to beat you over the head with my politics, and if you don't agree with me, we're going to spit at each other. And it gets pretty nasty out there. And another thing that is very frustrating was the support for ongoing wars by Christians. And like I said, I was a neocon, so I was one of those guys too. But once I started waking up to the reality of our situation and went from neocon to libertarian to anarchist, I started correlating the anarchy side with my faith, and they went together so easily for me, and it was the rest was history. And then last fall, last September, I started touring with the idea of doing a podcast. I sent some feelers out. I had no idea what I was doing, and I got some folks together that were willing to help write for our blog, and we started a website, and now it's taken off. People really resonated with it. I'm actually more surprised than anybody that people have actually latched on to, because I didn't know what to expect, but it's been a lot of fun, and we're just trying to get Christians to understand that we're supposed to be following Christ and not the state.
Yeah,
it's no king but Christ. That's just how we follow it. And we debate on voting and all this and this stuff, but we just need to follow Christ, and that's the bottom line. The Bad Roman. There's a saying. I'm gonna butcher this because I don't have it right in front of me, but being a bad Roman or being a good Christian sometimes meant being a bad Roman, meaning we follow Christ, not the state.
Yeah, totally. That's awesome. And what's kind of your, did you grow up as a Christian, or did you have a conversion experience later on in life?
My dad, when I was a kid, he was a Church of Christ preacher. So it's always been in my life at some form. I don't have any like really fantastic conversion experience. I've just always believed in Jesus, and
Sure.
it's just been how I guess I was raised, but I've been to several different types of denominations and stuff. So spent a lot of time in Southern Baptist churches as well. And right now with everything going on, I've been really upset with how the churches have been handling this pandemic stuff and how they're just kind of falling in line with what the government's saying. So I've just kind of stayed clear of it. I'd love to start a house church at some point, but everything's just way too busy for that right now.
Yeah, totally. Did like when you were growing up, and you told me earlier before the show, like you kind of grew up in the South. Was it a very like the whole mixture of church and politics, and was that very prevalent in your church experience growing up, or was it not really that talked about?
I don't really remember it much as a kid. My mom, I was talking to my mom about it. She goes, when she was a kid, she goes, I don't remember, and she's talking about my grandparents. She goes, I don't remember them ever talking about politics.
Yeah.
Then I got to thinking about it. I don't think I did ever. My first experience with politics, I remember sitting in my grandparents' living room. I don't remember how old I was. I was a kid. But Ronald Reagan was president. Yeah. And I remember he was giving a speech. I was like, man, this guy sounds great. I wish he could stay president all the time.
Oh, yeah.
And my Nana, she said, well, that's not how it works. I had no idea what she meant by that. I went on about being a kid and didn't think anything else about politics until 2000, when George W. Bush first ran. So yeah. I don't guess it was something that we really talked a whole lot. And if they did talk about it, they didn't talk about it to the kids.
Yeah. Okay, so in 2000, when you start becoming more politically aware, was there any sort of like, I know you were saying before, there's kind of like a marriage between faith and politics. Was there any one particular issue that sort of made you start thinking that, or was it your friend group? Or I'm just sort of curious, like, what was the thought process that led you down that road to be like abortion. a neo abortion? Yeah.
Yeah. So I was always against it.
Yeah.
I was, but even before I got into politics, I was against it. But
sure, yeah.
I don't even really remember I just remember liking George W. Bush a lot. And I don't know, to this day, something I've had to repent of. But the Republican Party was speaking against abortion.
Right. Yeah.
I had no idea what team I was on, so I went with the Republicans because that's what they were talking about. 20 years later, nothing's been done about it. And,
yeah.
And that's just my 20 years of being involved with politics. But yeah, it was abortion. And then right after 9/11, I turned into full-blown neocon, and I didn't even think about abortion much after that. It was all about getting them back.
How old were you when 9/11 happened?
Let's see. It was 2001. I was early 20s, 20, 21, 22.
Okay. Yeah, so you're probably a bit older than me, because I was like 11 or 12, maybe 13 when it happened. But it's obviously still very, very vivid. But it's kind of crazy to think back of how that event really shaped the world. And I think those of us who grew up during it can really appreciate it, where there's a lot of people I encounter today that are like in their early 20s, and either they weren't born yet or they just don't remember it, and they don't really realize how much of the world around them is shaped by that event. And even in terms of like political ideologies and world events and all that kind of stuff. But it's also kind of scary because it's amazing how quickly people forget.
Absolutely.
What happened, and particularly with, the disastrous wars that were fought, that, my country participated in, and still does participate in. People like to pretend that Canada is just this peaceful neutral country, but that's completely not true. We have a full-blown military industrial complex. There's manufacturing in Ontario and Quebec. I
was unaware of that. I was one of those that just thought y'all stayed out of everything.
No, we're still in Afghanistan. We have, they call them training missions, where they go and basically train future Taliban fighters to fight against them and support the U.S. It's certainly not near the scale of the U.S. involvement, but proportionately, it's still pretty bad. We've done nothing but support Saudi Arabia's involvement in Yemen, and
man,
it's really, really terrible. Like it makes me a little queasy, but there's an image that Canada has, I think, on the world stage that is very, very misleading, and we are certainly not, peace loving. There's this great propaganda thing that they call our soldiers. They call them Canadian peacekeepers. It's such a propaganda word, because they're not peacekeepers, they're war makers for the most part, or war keepers, if you will, because they go in and help to carry on perpetual war in all these countries, in all these nations that, like, Canada was never attacked by the Taliban, but for some reason we're in Afghanistan and we're in Iraq and we're in Syria.
Well, the same can be said, or can be said for the United States.
Yeah,
they never attacked us either.
Yeah, it's true, and that's the thing, is it was Al Qaeda, right? But for some reason we went to depose the Taliban. Anyways, it's a bunch of BS, I think, but that doesn't get nearly enough attention, and our media establishment here is just so unbelievably corrupt that no one would ever highlight or talk about it. There are some good journalists, individual journalists, who've written some good books about Canadian foreign policy, but they don't get much attention. So, but anyways,
I have to apologize. I don't know if you can hear my cat. She tends to join these meetings sometime, and if she happens to jump up and walk across the screen, I apologize in advance. But
it's all good. It's all good, man. I'm not like super professional here or anything.
Neither are we. Yeah. And she makes sure of it.
Nice. So, so I'm curious now. You've gone through, like, you were a neocon. What changed your mind from that? Like, was there an issue or event that pushed you out of that, or a series of events?
Well, back in 2016, when Donald Trump was nominated, is when I started getting away from the Republican Party, because there's no way I could side with him. And the whole time during the run-up to that nomination, I was a big Ted Cruz supporter.
Yeah.
So I know then I was still a neocon, because Ted Cruz would say things like, "We're going to make the sand glow," and I was cheering stuff like that. So
yeah.
But once Trump won the nomination, I said, I was still going to vote. I was still going to participate somehow, but I had to find a third party, somebody else. So I got involved with some libertarian groups. I ended up voting Constitution Party for Darrell Castle, because I couldn't get on board with Gary Johnson for the Libertarian Party. Well, but I would stay in these libertarian groups, and I would keep talking to libertarians, and still a neocon. I'm still trying to plead my case that we're supposed to be fighting them over there, and libertarians are basically laughing me off the page. And you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, well, libertarians are not a group that's going to be easily convinced that we got to go on foreign adventure.
Make the sand glow. But so that, and there was anarchists in these groups as well. So, and I would see these anarchists, but I wouldn't pay them a lot of attention. I thought they were just crazy. I thought they were just hanging out to kind of disrupt things.
I got to say, that's a pretty big leap from, like, neocon in 2016 to anarchist in 2020.
Well, okay. Actually, it was a little quicker than that, because I think I moved to Memphis around 2018. I was still in between, but I woke up one day that year, I'm an anarchist. It was like 2 years.
Yeah.
From 2016 to 2018.
Mm-hmm.
But there was just talking to him about the non-aggression principle. I never even heard this term before until I got involved with these groups. And then back in the day, I was one of those that were booing Ron Paul off the stage. But then I got to listen to Ron Paul some more. So, a lot of anarchists or libertarians got to where they are now because of Ron Paul. That didn't happen to me.
Yeah.
It took me a while to get on board with him.
What's the I understand, but maybe for some people who are listening, what is the non-aggression principle?
don't hurt people and don't take their stuff. It's very, very simple. Just if you're not being aggressed on, don't aggress on other people. It's very simple. Just we're not to, and if you look at Christianity, we're not supposed to be doing that. And Jesus was a peacemaker.
Yeah. So then was there anything in particular that pushed you into anarchy? Was there like a single argument or anecdote that was like, okay, I'm done with this? Or was it just kind of more of a I find with me in my own evolution, it's more gradual. There's no single moment that
Yeah, it was a progression, because I interviewed somebody on a show, and he remembers, he's got like an anarchy date, like he celebrates when he became an anarchist. I have no idea what day it was that happened to me. It just happened because
a born again anarchist.
Basically, but going back to 2016, when Donald Trump was nominated, we were starting some small groups in Arkansas to try to get people in to learn about liberty and about the Constitution and stuff. Well, the guy that I've learned so much from, he's been my mentor. I was on his radio show last Sunday. He's an anarchist, but I didn't know he was an anarchist. But he's been studying the founding of our country for years.
Okay.
I mean, he goes like way back into it. So my study of the Constitution actually led me to anarchy. And I've talked to other anarchists that feel the same way. That's how they got where they are, because once you get through all that jibber jabber of the Constitution, you realize it's just a piece of paper. Our best bet is to be an anarchist. Once I started studying more about anarchy as a Christian, I could compare the two, and then, like I said, it was so easy for me to become an anarchist after that. So I think that's, once I started being able to compare it to my faith, it was done. It was a done deal. I was an anarchist.
Do you think that like the term anarchist is kind of a loaded term, and it can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people?
Well, it does mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people, but a lot of different people don't understand what it means, if that makes sense.
So what does it mean then?
I've always been a big fan of individualism, and that's something that drew me to anarchy, was because of the individual side of it.
Yeah.
I think it just means self-rule. You worry about yourself.
Okay. Yeah.
And you're interacting peacefully with other people. You're just not. That's all it. Well, and people like to use the term voluntarist or voluntarist, however you pronounce it. But I like anarchist because it spurs a conversation sometimes.
That's true. It's almost like in my friend group, if I came out and said I'm an anarchist, it's sort of like, there's a lot of heads exploding. Like, how could you possibly, but that there's sort of a caricature of anarchy, right? Like, people think that no rules means anarchy. And I think that's sort of a misconception about, it doesn't mean no rules. It means no rulers, if you will. But right. Now as a person of faith, here's my only maybe pushback on that. Is I do feel like I should have a ruler, but that ruler is Jesus Christ.
Right.
And so in that sense, am I really an anarchist? Like, for me personally, politically, I call myself a voluntarist, right? And like you mentioned before, and I feel like that fits me better into what I actually believe, because I don't literally believe no rulers. I just believe there's only one ruler. And you said earlier, no king but Christ, in that sense. And so, his rule sort of supersedes any earthly rule to me. And we should always be faithful to him first, above anything else. But there's a lot of implications to that. But like, what do you think about that? Do you think that it's fine I should keep using anarchist, or do you think that I just have that slight issue with the term?
Well, it's interesting you said that, because I was thinking about this the other day, because when I was learning about anarchy, that was one of the things I kept running into with other anarchists, or before I was an anarchist, was there's no masters, no rulers.
Yeah. And a lot of
But I kept in the back of my head, I was like, hang on, I do have a king, and he is Christ. And and I think in a lot of anarchists, if you're trying to get people on your side or to understand what you're saying, I think using that, especially against Christians that are trying to get away from politics.
Yeah.
you're going to push them away. You're not bringing them in to try and teach them more about it. And I think it's with Christians, we don't have any earthly rulers. We don't recognize any earthly rulers. We have a king that is not of this world. His kingdom, he says it himself, is not of this world. So the no king but Christ means no king on earth. Christ is already here with us.
Yeah.
His kingdom is not of this world. So I don't see any problem with it. I mean, saying no king but Christ and still having a ruler as an anarchist.
Yeah, fair enough. I think anarchism tends, at least from everything I've read from it, it tends to be associated with atheists and atheism. And there's definitely a lot of intellectual anarchists who were atheists, and they have like real big problems with religion. They don't feel like you can be religious at all and call yourself an anarchist. I kind of agree with you more that, at the end of the day, they want to abolish the state, the same that a Christian anarchist would want to, in many of the same ways a Christian anarchist would want to abolish the state, right? And we'll get into maybe what we mean by the state and what we don't mean. Nice cat. Yeah. Anyways, so so I'm curious then, let's get into like, what is your theological approach to the government? Especially in terms of, well, just answer me that. What's your theological approach to the government?
As far as participation or
like, what do you think that is do you have any kind of like theology of the state, or do you have like, what do you think the Bible tells us as Christians how we are to relate to the state?
Well, I mean, Jesus in his temptation was, he outright rejected the state. And as Christians, we're supposed to try to do our best to follow his example.
Yeah.
His teaching. So if it was good enough for Jesus to reject the state, then it's good enough for Craig. You know what I mean? Totally. Now, we had Bruxy Cavey on our show, and
I like Bruxy.
Bruxy's awesome. Yeah. He said something very interesting. He said, now you might have some. He said, don't worry about what the state's doing. The state's going to do state stuff. He said, you might have some very strong opinions about what the state's doing, and we do as anarchists. Obviously, we're gonna have some very strong opinions. He said, but it's still not. He said it's not my thing. It's a thing, but it's not my thing.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I do appreciate that from him. He does sort of, yeah. He very intentionally, and it's hard, man. It's hard to like find the right line to walk as a Christian. And I think in this day and age, when the state is so unbelievably involved with every aspect of our lives and becoming like in the year 2020, whether you're pro lockdown or not, you cannot deny that the state has become unbelievably involved in every aspect of our lives. And it's very hard to avoid that. It's very hard, like, it's hard to avoid politics when politics is thrust on you and affecting your livelihood and your and the livelihood of your community and all that, right? So
they make it very difficult to love your neighbor.
Yeah, totally. and they create enemies out of your neighbor, right? Because
that's their job.
Yeah, they do nothing. It seems like they do nothing but sow derision and hate amongst people, because they sort of dangle the carrot stick above us, which is like, the power that they wield, and if you vote for them, they'll give you this power to impose your utopia on the rest of us. But so what is your response to, like, I know a lot of people I encounter, particularly Christians, their response to something like Romans 13 or 1 Peter or whatever. Do you have you thought through that, or do you have a response to that?
Romans 13 is Romans 13 is used an awful lot against what we're trying to get across to people. And if you read Acts 5 says we're to obey God rather than man.
Right.
If you read Romans 13, it says we're to submit to governing authorities. If you go look at the original Greek and the words submit and obey, that's two different meanings. I have one of my favorite examples of this is Rosa Parks.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, so when Rosa Parks was on the bus and she was being told to move or they were going to call the police because of a ridiculous law, she was sitting where she was supposed to be anyway, according to their laws, right?
Yeah.
But since the bus was full, they were trying to make her move, and she said, "I'm not moving." The bus driver said, "If you don't move, I'm going to have to call the police." And she said, "You may." She didn't move. She did not obey the law. Now, when governing authorities came to arrest her, she submitted to them without any kind of violent reaction to it. And she was a devout Christian.
Yes.
So I think she understood it better than anybody. I'm not obeying this law, but when you come to arrest me, I'm going to submit to you. I'm not going to fight back.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel a similar way, you know, like at the end of the day, they're the guys with the guns. So it's
well, and I think what we're seeing in 2020, and I'm big on civil disobedience.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So and somebody said people are going to get arrested. I said, yeah, people are going to get arrested. I said, but at some point they're going to have to understand that there's more of us. Yeah. And they can't just start forcing people. And I have a lot of friends that are small business owners that I've been imploring them. I said, y'all just need to tell them to stop. You're not going to listen to what they're saying, and just open up, have people in. If they want to come in and eat without a mask on, man, just let them in.
Yeah.
And the more people that do that, this stuff will go away. Yeah. But the more people that are complying to it and just bowing down to it without any kind of resistance, and I'm not talking about what they were calling anarchy on Fox News, what Donald Trump was calling anarchy, what Sean Hannity was calling anarchy. Yeah. I'm talking about just civil disobedience. Be prepared to go to jail. Now, we've seen this happening already, and I think it was in New York and New Jersey, that there was enough money raised by people to post bond for somebody that got arrested. This is how a voluntary society would work, and this is how we can get the state to go away.
Yeah. And
we're going to have to do it a little bit at a time, but cowering down and bowing down to them at every turn is not helpful at all. It's encouraging them.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and it, like in Alberta, just a few weeks ago, they at least at the time of this recording, they issued an order, an edict, I would call it, that it is now illegal for you to gather with someone outside of your own home. So that they're telling us who we can and cannot have within the confines of our own home, right? And I've been saying much the same thing to people. I'm like, don't obey, do not comply with these. You know, I know that there's already, I know for a fact there's already widespread non-compliance with this. The idea that they could even enforce this in any way is just a complete joke, right? But there's still a huge amount of people who feel like we need to follow this, and there's, I don't know what it's like down there, but here in Canada, it's there. I saw a recent poll in this province that about 50% are strongly in favor of all the restrictions. 20% are not in favor, but they're willing to obey them, and then 30% are not in favor and are saying they will disobey the laws. So 30% is not an insignificant number.
Not at all.
But
and I think they could win that 20% over very quickly too, because I think we had, what people tend to forget too is we have a way of empowering each other.
Right.
If you see one person walking around, like if you see a grocery store full of people with a mask on, and as long as the business doesn't care if you're wearing a mask, if those people seeing you not wearing a mask and other people are sick of wearing these masks, they're going to start pulling their mask off. Yes. I've seen it happen.
Yeah.
I saw an example, and I've always been curious how they're going to enforce this, and they're using the public to do this, because I was Now you see in Australia these cops are out there bullying people around, and so it's awful over there. But
so
like
awful.
last Saturday night, I got off work. I stopped at the gas station here in Tennessee. You can buy beer until 3 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
I stopped and grabbed a 6-pack of beer. There's 2 cops parked in the parking lot. I can't wear a mask because I have an underlying health issue. I got out of my truck, I parked in between both of them. The one cop left, the other cop got out of his vehicle and followed me in the store. I thought there was going to be, I was had to explain to him my situation. He didn't even look at me. He didn't say nothing to me. The guy behind the counter didn't say nothing to me. So they're not enforcing this to the fact that people think they are. It's the public. It's people on social media trying to shame people into.
Oh yeah.
The bullying is awful.
Oh, the harassment and the bullying is off the charts, man. It's and that's sort of the thing that scares me the most is that it's not so much the politicians, though they're guilty of it. It's about half the population wants to send you to jail, to a rape cage for a nonviolent offense,
right?
Because of their over exaggerated fear about a virus. Now, I shouldn't even need to qualify when I say this. I do believe the virus is real, and I believe that it is deadly to a certain demographic of the population, and it spreads very quickly, and it's a novel virus, and it's more dangerous, and we should take precautions, voluntarily take precautions to slow down the spread. Now, I say all that. I think it is completely immoral for governments to just be allowed to go completely tyrannical, but to be cheered on by your neighbors. We have snitch lines up here. I don't know if you guys have that there, but
I've seen them.
Yeah. We have snitch lines where you can call the
How
police.
shallow of a person do you have to be?
Oh man!
You call and tell on your neighbor for not wearing a mask or hanging out with their buddies or something. I just don't understand what goes through a person's mind to think that they could call and tattle on somebody like that. This is not kindergarten.
Well, and not only that is it's really damaging the social fabric that exists within our society. The amount of distrust that is prevalent among us now, and that we have to be watching out that the secret police could be ratting on us, and that.
Well, yeah, you don't know what you're going to walk into anymore.
Totally. Yeah, if you have a friend over at your house, you have to make sure they park far away, or park somewhere where there's no suspicion that they're visiting your house, because, and it's not the police, because they're only enforcing these laws on like a complaint basis. It's your neighbors, and you're being encouraged by your government to behave cruelly and oppressively to your own neighbors. And I just think that is like, especially as Christians, we have to speak out about that. And I want to get into sort of the church's response, which I have been very disappointed about in all of this. I feel like the first 3 months of this, I gave like a lot of, I was willing to give a lot of people a lot of grace and leeway about like, hey, like none of us really know, especially the first couple of weeks, really. No one really knows. They were telling us it was going to be the flu pandemic of 1918. We could see the models were predicting 1% to 3% of the world's population was going to be wiped out by this, and our hospital systems were going to be completely overwhelmed. And based on that faulty information is why a lot of us even voluntarily self-isolated and limited our contacts and didn't go to work and whatnot. That was all completely untrue. It wasn't attached to any kind of reality as we know it. Now, what we do know now is it is a nasty bug, but That's all it is. It's a nasty bug, and it's going to kill people as bugs do. And every few years we get some that kill a lot of people. A lot of people forget, the swine flu, I believe, killed 500 or 600,000 to 1 million people, and that was like way less. The spread was not nearly as much as it is now. But anyways, the church's response to this, and like I said, I'm willing to give them a little bit of leeway, but I'm seeing a lot of Christians play apologetics, not for God, but for the state and for the government's mandate. And I'm getting very concerned about it. And they're doing this guilt and shame thing where if you don't wear a mask, which, by the way, there's no evidence that masks have significantly reduced the spread at all, or if you don't stay home, or if you don't follow all these rules, you're being unloving to your neighbor. What would your response be to that?
Well, I think it's unloving to your neighbor to try to shame them into wearing a mask if they're not comfortable wearing a mask. I've had to explain this to more than one Christian.
Yeah.
I cannot wear a mask myself because I have an underlying health issue that will not allow me to. I've been to my doctor, and she fully agrees that I shouldn't be wearing a mask. And you're right. There's no proof that it even helps do anything. To me, it appears that it's causing things to be worse.
Yeah.
The stuff I've heard from other doctors and nurses on podcasts, you're not going to hear it on mainstream media. But getting back to your question, I think the church's response should be to love your neighbor.
Absolutely.
That's what Jesus taught us. Love your neighbor. And if your neighbor wants to wear a mask, let them wear a mask. If your neighbor doesn't want to wear a mask, it's none of your business.
Yeah.
But the fact that the church, which I guess a lot of them could be considered the state these days, but they're so intertwined with the state that they're just going to go along to get along with whatever they say.
Yeah.
That's one thing that spurred our project, was just how intertwined the two have become.
Yeah.
And I think the church's response should be to tell the government to get bent. They just should tell them to, not in so many words, but just to get bent. Leave. It's none of your business what we're doing. We have freedom to associate. We have freedom of our religious beliefs, and this is not just the church. This includes all faiths.
Yeah.
They should all be working against the state when it comes to this. It's none of their business.
Yeah. And do you think that that might be true, but the problem with that is like people have the majority of people that I encounter have a very different premise. They do believe in the sort of omnipotence of the state, and that the state can behave in any which way it wants in the name of safety and security. And so how do you challenge that assumption, but also how do you show that it's not loving to your neighbor to lock down the economy? That's hard that doesn't fit well on a bumper sticker, but because we haven't been gathering very good statistics about the deaths as a result of lockdown, not just at home, but also
those stats are coming out. They're coming out more and more every day. That's something I've been following a lot. That's what we were talking about before we started recording. But it's not loving your neighbor to lock down somebody's business and take their livelihood away.
Yeah.
Right when this started, suicide rates in Tennessee started spiking.
Oh yeah, same in Alberta.
At one point, it may be this. I haven't checked the numbers lately, but it may still be the same. But at one time, there were more suicides in the state of Tennessee than there were coronavirus deaths.
Yeah,
and not a town, not maybe 30 minutes from me, there was two teachers who were married to each other, and they had children. Once they shut the schools down, they didn't know where their paychecks would come. They both committed suicide. Let their children alone.
Oh.
This is the stuff that's happening that people aren't talking about.
Yeah.
So I think the church's response, or it's not loving your neighbor to lock a person out of their livelihood, how they're going to feed their children.
Yeah.
And if a person doesn't want to associate with somebody in their business because it's called the free market.
Yeah.
You know, if you don't want to go there, don't go. But don't tell somebody else they can't go. That's not loving your neighbor.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, they're telling you that the lockdowns too are going to cause millions of deaths due to starvation worldwide.
Oh yeah, and this is and that's even I want to say too, that's not even like just a fringe idea. This is UNICEF has said this, that the lockdowns will double starvation in 2020 and 2021 as well, and the sheer amount of suffering that is going to cause.
And then people, that's what I'm saying. This is how you love your neighbor. Let them. Yeah, that's not loving your neighbor by starving them to death.
Yeah, it's completely like supporting the government in its imprisoning of its own people and starving people around the world. I cannot understand. I can't even begin to understand how that is in any way a loving, Christ-like thing to do.
Well, people can't think outside of their own realm. They only see what's happening in front of them or what they've heard from a friend. You know, I'm with you. I think it's a real bug. I think people have died from it. I've never called it a hoax. I've seen people calling it a hoax. I'm not getting into all that.
Sure. Yeah.
You know, but I do believe it's another version of the flu that's just a little nastier. This happens all the time.
Yeah.
We had Carrie Baldwin on right after this started, and she had an article, the virulence of moral panic was her article. And we were talking about this, and she goes, we hear this every year. Man, that bug going around is really nasty. You know, and there's always a nastier version. And it's affecting people different. I've got people that are guys I work with that have caught it. And it's hit him hard. My dad had it. It hit him hard.
Yeah.
You know, he's in his 60s. I get it. But that happens every single year.
Yeah.
There's always a nasty bug going around. And for some reason, this spam is just people, the media, and I blame them more than anybody. They've pushed this fear on people so much that.
It's terrible. It's almost criminal, I would say. And there's never a retraction. There's never a correction of the
well, they're not held accountable for it.
The wild, completely unsubstantiated misinformation which they spread, are surrounding this virus, and it's causing lives. People's actual fear is causing deaths, and it's hard. It's hard to it's easy to see just like the sheer deaths and hospitalizations of COVID, but it's harder to see the unseen consequences, right? Like there's the hidden and the unseen, and the like you said, suicides in Alberta. We're seeing record numbers of fentanyl overdoses. We've had a real bad fentanyl problem in previous years, and they're expecting fentanyl deaths to double this year, which will exceed the amount of coronavirus deaths from this year. And it's hard. I don't want to say.
You remember,
correlation is not causation. But I think we can all say, if we're having double the fentanyl deaths in 2020, it's a pretty good indicator that there was something had to do with that. It wasn't just a random spike in fentanyl deaths. You know what I mean?
Well, if you want to look at it logically, I mean, a lot of people can't get out of that for some reason. They don't, because if it goes against their narrative of any kind, they're not going. And there's a phrase we use. People are afraid to eat crow. Once they've said something, they're going to stick to it because they don't want to eat crow later.
Yeah.
Now, I say this, and I hope I'm not hurting anybody's feelings, but I've always understood that there were stupid people in this world, but so many of them have been exposed during this. And you remember back when this started, they told us when flu season hit and we got more testing, the cases were going to go up. Yeah, this was all going to happen. But a lot of people have the mind of a goldfish. They can't now remember 2 minutes later what was said before.
Yeah,
we knew this was going to happen. They told us it was going to happen, and now that it's happening, They forget that they told us that. And now it's panic time again.
Yeah.
Let's lock everything down again. We've been on a 2-week lockdown for 10 months now to slow the curve.
Yeah, I know, 15 days. That's what I was thinking. That's all it's going to take, man.
If you don't laugh, you'll cry.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and also, getting back to the sort of Christian implications of this, I can't help but think Jesus said himself, when I was hungry, did you feed me? When I was naked, did you clothe me? When I was sick, did you visit me? When I was in prison, did you come to see me? Whatever you did unto the least of these, you've done unto me. We have
and he's talking about you and me. He's not talking about the state.
Yeah.
I had somebody tell me, and this is the stuff I'm hearing. She told me this the other day. It blows my mind that people think this way. If the government would just pay us to stay home, this would all go away. And I didn't know how to respond to that. I was like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
Yeah.
How are they going to pay somebody? They're getting their money from somewhere.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, they tried that in Canada and it didn't work. The virus never went away, and it's back. It's back worse than ever now. They basically, there's 8 million people overnight went on welfare, and that may not seem like a lot, but for Canada, for a population of 38 million, 8 million overnight is like a huge increase in those taking unemployment. But the government just said, yeah, we'll pay everyone $2,000 a month, and you don't have to go to work, right?
Who can live off of $2,000 a month? But getting back to your point, a lot of Christians want to outsource what Jesus was saying, outsources to the state.
Yeah.
Instead of doing it themselves.
Yeah.
It's too much work.
Well, not only that, though, not only do they not carry it out themselves, like I was saying, they almost directly ask the state to disobey them, those commands by Jesus. Because, are we visiting the sick? No. we're being told to isolate and stay away from one another. I'm not like a name it and claim it faith healer person, but I do believe God can heal people. And if you're a healthy person, young person who's at relatively low risk, you should be able to go and visit the sick, right? And if you're you should be able. Now we're put on house arrest by the state, so now we're all prisoners. Well, what should Christians do? We should go visit those who are in prison, and for many people, particularly with mental health issues, they're literally in a prison now because they're being forced to isolate. So I cannot see how you can obey the government and the state at the same time in this situation. I don't understand it. And
you can't.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, Jesus said you can't have two masters.
That's right. Yeah.
I mean, who are you going to follow, Christ or the state? And that's what we get back with the bad Roman projects. We're following Christ, no king but Christ. And because he said it, you can't have two masters.
Yeah. You're
going to love one and hate the other.
Yeah, it's true. And it's right on, man. I am struggling with those Christians who, they're brothers and sisters in Christ, and God bless them. But I am struggling how they can be so trite and dismissive about the suffering of people who are suffering as a direct result of lockdowns and as a direct result of government tyranny, and not just of government tyranny, but our acquiescence to that tyranny. Mm-hmm. Right? It's like, in a lot of ways, we as a population have allowed this to happen. If we just, like you were saying earlier, if we just said no and refused to follow these edicts, they wouldn't be able to punish us so severely, but yet they are. And I don't know, talking with other Christians, and there's a lot of them that feel this way about these lockdowns. And I've been very public and vocal in my conversations and on social media that I won't be in the latest round of lockdowns we're doing. I will be intentionally uh, taking part in civil disobedience. And I believe that that's part of loving my neighbor, because, I'm not going to let my community, my society, and the future for my son be destroyed because of people's irrational fears.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Well, good for you. We need more of you out there, because it's, here in Memphis, the health department just passed a new rule with restaurants, and this is just dumb. Used to, you had to wear a mask to go in, and when you were seated, you could take your mask off. Now they're saying you have to keep it on at all times. This is just this county I live in. But you pull the mask aside to take a sip or take a bite, and then put your mask back on.
Oh my goodness.
Now, whether restaurants are enforcing it or not, I don't know. I live in Carterville at the moment, and I was talking to somebody at work. They went out to eat, and they said we didn't wear a mask while we were eating. We wore it in, but
yeah.
The gym I go to, they're saying you have to wear a mask the whole time. How do you wear a mask when you're on the treadmill or on an elliptical?
Oh, yeah.
People are going to start passing out. This is just retarded. None of it makes any sense to me.
It's all completely arbitrary. I call it's sort of like a security theater, like what they do with like the TSA when you fly. None of the security checkpoints you go through have done anything to stop terrorist attacks.
Right.
There's no evidence that they've done anything, and this is very much like it. It's all performative. You know what I mean? Like we're wearing PPE, and we're excessively washing our hands, and we're making sure to avoid people and hang out with people outside only, not inside.
I was telling someone when this started, and I brought it up the other day at work. When all this started, I was like, man, I grew up in West Texas. We played in cow pastures, picked up cow patties and threw them at each other. This virus does not scare me.
Yeah.
And I'm sure when we got done playing with cow patties, we went and had a peanut butter and jelly sandwich without washing our hands. We weren't we were kids,
Yeah.
I think you start over sterilizing everything. You're just gonna your immune system is just gonna rely on that more than itself, and it's just.
Yeah. Well,
I'm a big fan of taking vitamins. Like I've been doing it even before then. That's why this stuff doesn't bother me. It was funny when this started. Toilet paper was flying off the shelves, but the vitamin aisle was completely full, stocked full. The vitamin C and zinc and vitamin D, all that stuff was there. Now you can't really find it. I've been having to order it through Amazon, but people picked up on that eventually.
Yeah, it's the madness of crowds, right? Like people do crazy things in uncertain times. But so what do you think? Like, are there any like real practical things we can sort of live out the gospel in the midst of these sort of dark times where the state is intentionally and deliberately causing a lot of suffering for people?
I think you need to go visit your family. I think you need to go visit your friends and tell the state to get bent. Because they're lonely.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm serious. People are dying of loneliness right now. A lot of Alzheimer's patients are dying because they can't see their family.
Yeah.
And I mentioned about my brother back in August. He passed away. He bought into this virus, hook, line, and sinker. He was terrified of it. He wouldn't leave his apartment. He got furloughed from work. He wouldn't go back to work. He was living off of unemployment, and he drank and drank and drank. It was a recipe for disaster, and it ended up killing him. Man. Now we fully believe that had he had any sense of normalcy, he would still be alive today. Go love your neighbor. Go visit them because they want to see you. Yeah. Even if they believe in this stuff and they want to wear a mask, and if y'all just hang out 6 feet apart, go see them.
Yeah, totally.
We're social creatures.
Yeah.
Even and I'm an introvert sometimes. I don't mind sitting at home. I'm good with it. People get on my nerves a lot of the times, but I do like social interaction with people.
Yeah.
And I'm talking about handshakes, face-to-face stuff. This is cool what we're doing here, but I want to go hang out. I want to go belly up to the bar and have a margarita so bad I can't understand it. I want to go hang out with my buddies. I told you I lived in Arkansas before I moved to Tennessee. I've been back twice since it started. I haven't been able to see my friends because there's nowhere to go. We'd go meet at a restaurant, go have some beers, eat, and and catch up. And now that we just can't do it.
Yeah.
You know, and they're go see your friends, go see your family.
Yeah. Do you think that, well, sort of my biggest fear is that the amount of suffering, we've only seen the tip of the iceberg, and that the longer that these lockdowns continue, we're going to hit a tipping point eventually where suicides are through the roof, economic deprivation is through the roof, and do you think there's a real concern about, I don't know, going the way of Venezuela or Zimbabwe, where we in the Western world are starving? Or do you think that's maybe over exaggerating the threat?
I don't think it's over exaggerating. I don't think we've seen it. We haven't seen it full scale yet. Yeah. I think it's coming. And I've tried to explain that to people with what's going on. It's going to get bad. And it's going to get bad before, it gets worse. And then it might get better. But we're going to have to eat some of the stuff we've been dealing with right now, or what we've been going through, because it's going to, the current, it's not happening to us yet.
Yeah.
Like the starvation around the world we was talking about, that's coming. It's not happening today, but it's coming, and it's going to be on a bigger scale than what coronavirus was.
Yeah.
And coronavirus at the time may even go away. Maybe that's when we stop hearing about coronavirus and they're talking about all the starvation, but then trying to explain to people what caused the starvation or caused the spike in suicide or the people dying from loneliness and this and that. They're not going to remember that it was the lockdowns that caused it. Yeah. They're going to try and figure out, well, why didn't the government do more? No. The government caused this.
Yeah.
This is because of their actions.
Yeah.
And when this started, and I brought up Carrie Baldwin, I told her, I said, as anarchists and libertarians, we started trying to get out in front of this immediately because you saw how the state was going to respond. And they responded accordingly.
Yeah.
And everything they touch, they screw up.
Yeah. It's
everything. And anybody that's relying on them with the whole vaccine thing that they're talking about now.
Oh yeah.
The Obama, Bush, and Clinton, like, we'll take a vaccine on TV to build confidence. I'm like, what if they're taking a B12 shot?
Yeah.
Like, why would they do that? And I said, it's the state.
Yeah.
Do you think why should I get my confidence or my trust from people that are known liars, thieves, and murderers?
Yeah. Well,
why would I trust what they're saying?
Between those three guys, how many people have they murdered?
Exactly.
Is a good question. And that's who we're supposed to take our cues from. Yeah. Give me a break, man.
The problem is people are going to.
Yeah, it's such a funny, obvious, propaganda gimmick, like look, I'm gonna even our political officials up here were all doing the same thing for the flu shot earlier this year, and I'm sure they'll do the exact same thing for the COVID shot, but for the flu shot they were all like, it's so funny, it's become so ritualized and I would almost say religious, the way that we follow this virus. It's almost like a COVID religion. They have their mask on and they're getting their shot, and they're they're telling people how important it is to get your flu shot, and yada yada yada. I'm like me, I personally am not really per se against vaccines, but I think that the idea that this vaccine is going to be some kind of panacea is absurd. I do not think it's going to be as effective as people think it will be.
Well, didn't they just come out the other day that a couple people in England have already died from it?
Yeah, Canada is now reviewing, because we just approved the Pfizer vaccine. But now they're reviewing it for people with bad allergies because they could have a really bad reaction.
Well, it's the virus. Are they not putting the virus that everybody's against, putting it into people?
You're trying
that's how a vaccine works, right?
Yeah,
but
you're trying to initiate.
I don't care if a person wants to get a vaccine. That's none of my business. Have a ball. Wear a mask. Do whatever you want to do. But I'm not interested in taking the vaccine. Last time I took a flu vaccine, I was a kid and I got really sick.
Yeah,
I haven't been sick with the flu since, but that's why I said I'm really kind of crazy about my vitamin intake, so I don't worry about this stuff.
Yeah, totally. And I think that's probably the best thing you can do, right? But
And also, we're all going to die at some point. Not to paint a grim picture, but it happens 100% to everybody. And
yeah,
I have a hard time wanting to live my life in fear of how I'm going to die. It's just if it happens, man.
totally.
What did Paul say? To be absent of the body, be present with the Lord. All right.
That's
it doesn't mean I'm sitting around waiting to die either. People have been accused of that too. I'm not sitting around waiting to die. I just don't worry about this stuff. There's a lot more important things that we should be worrying about than our own lives.
Yeah, totally. And I don't even think that it may, honestly, the biggest problem with vaccines isn't that there are some small amounts of cases of vaccine injury, but the biggest problem is that they're becoming ineffective, right? So they're not actually having the effect that we hope that they have. And so I know in Canada recently, in recent years, a lot of flu shots have only been bringing about 35% effectiveness. Like a lot of people are still getting the flu even after getting the flu shot, right? Mm-hmm. So it's not working. It's not effective. And
they've been saying for years they don't know if they're giving you the right strand of flu in the vaccine.
Yeah, right.
I'm like, well, what's the point in doing it then? I mean, I don't
Fair
know.
Enough,
It just doesn't make sense. If it doesn't make sense to me, I'm not going to do it.
Oh yeah, I don't blame you, and I definitely wouldn't blame anyone for not wanting to take this round of vaccine. I personally don't want to be their guinea pig.
Right.
I might consider taking it in a few years, but we'll see what they do with that. But in any case, it's I don't know. I think that my point on that though is I think a lot of people believe that that's the light at the end of the tunnel, right? Like once we get the vaccine, we can end these lockdowns and we'll get out of this. And I think people are way too bullish on the vaccine, and they need to get way more bearish on the vaccine, right? So I don't believe we will see the end of lockdowns in 2021. I think they will continue for sure. They may lift certain restrictions here, keep others there. I think by 2022, we're all gonna come to the realization that even if there was never another COVID case again, many of these restrictions, they're going to keep them in forever unless we figure out a way to abolish those laws, right? So and not to mention the insane amount of government spending. So I think all the stuff that the vaccine brought in terms of government response is going to continue even after the virus is no longer with us or not a big part of our lives. Would you agree with that assessment?
I hope you're wrong. I'll start with that but I don't know, because the longer this is gone, it doesn't appear to be going away. It seems to be just amping up.
Yeah.
And then I think it just depends on where you live too. Like the county that I live in here in Tennessee is pretty bad. The first part of the year, first part of February, I'll be moving out of this county on purpose because of how they've acted like this. And I think that could actually start helping. If you see what's happening in California and New York and people are leaving in droves, eventually the states are going to fall apart.
Yeah.
You're going to see the empire of those states crumble because they don't have any way to support them because people have left. And I think that people started doing that. If you want to live in big cities like Memphis or Dallas, because Memphis and Dallas are similar, then do it. Yeah. Enjoy your lockdowns.
Yeah, exactly.
But stay out of my county whenever you want to come up when you need some help. You know what I mean? Because you've done it to yourself.
Yeah.
And I think that's a way we can. And I don't. Maybe that sounds like don't love your neighbor. It's not. That's not what I meant by it. But I think you kind of reap what you sow.
Yeah.
If you're gonna live in a situation like that, have a ball. But I'm gonna choose to move out of it if I can. Now I understand not everybody can. Not everybody can just move away, but that's where civil disobedience is going to come in. And I think once you have civil disobedience, you can empower people. But I don't know, man. I hope it's done by next year. I don't know. I keep hearing this new normal. That's one of the worst things. I can't. I'm so sick of hearing new normal.
So
the first time I heard it, I was like,
so
it might be your new normal, but it's not my new normal.
Yeah. Yeah. It's pretty terrible. I've
had a theory though, and I don't mean to interrupt you, but I've had a theory since it started, and I'm waiting for it to happen. When it started, I took some time off work to watch the NCAA basketball conference tournament. A big Arkansas Razorback fan.
Okay.
They won on Wednesday night, beat Vanderbilt. The next day, everything shut down.
Oh.
I was so disappointed. Like I had a whole weekend set. I was going to watch basketball, but I've had a theory that because if they're going to keep cutting revenue to these universities, because a lot of their revenue comes from sporting, their athletic department, so they're not going to be able to pay their coaches.
Yeah.
These NFL, NBA, MLB owners aren't going to be able to pay their players because they don't have fan revenue.
Yeah.
Once rich people start losing their money, the government tends to listen.
That's true, yeah.
And so I've had a theory that maybe once these people get sick of going broke, they're going to start pushing back against the state, and then that may be our saving grace as far as the state ending some of these lockdowns. I don't know. It's just been a theory. I keep waiting for it to happen. I know it's still kind of early, but I, for one, have stopped watching them, not because of – partly because of how they reacted to it, but they've sucked the life out of it for me.
Yeah.
If there's no fan interaction, it's just boring to me. I'm a big Dallas Cowboy fan. I can't even watch the NFL right now.
Oh, no? You haven't been watching it?
I have not. I've bits and pieces, and I have no feeling for them. Like you said, I was a big fanatic about the Cowboys, Every Sunday I was ready to watch them, but I just don't have any feeling. My mom, I was talking to her about it. She's the same way. Thanksgiving, the Cowboys always play. I was there for Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
We watched maybe the first 5 minutes of the game. We went outside, just enjoyed that fresh air, just left it alone.
Yeah. I have been watching NFL this year, but I was a huge NBA fan for years. But I didn't watch any of the playoffs this year. There's
nothing there.
Yeah,
don't insult my intelligence with piped-in crowd noise. Come on, that's with the NFL. Somebody told me they were watching the Patriots when the first NFL when it first started, and they had the piped-in crowd noise, and the refs made a call, and then the crowd was booing him, and then the announcer's like, "Ooh, the crowd didn't like that call." There's nobody there. There's not a crowd there to just be disappointed about the call.
Yeah, totally.
Come on. This is a clown show.
I know. Yeah.
Have you seen the movie Idiocracy?
I haven't. No.
It's a documentary now.
Okay.
It's a really stupid movie, but if you watch it, you'll be like, we're waking up in Idiocracy every day now.
I should watch. Is it on Netflix?
Maybe. You'll be able to find it somewhere. It was on HBO just the other day, and I was like, God, this is depressing.
Nice. So Greg, last couple of questions here. Do you have any books or movies or shows or podcasts that you would recommend in terms of like a lot of your ideas and the stuff that you talk about with Christian anarchism?
Podcast wise, there's Anarcho-Christian. I don't know if you're familiar with them. Godarchy. There's a couple new ones that are coming out just now starting. I can't remember the names of them, but book-wise, Jesus Untangled by Keith Giles is a great book. I don't know if he calls himself an anarchist or not, but if you read this book, anarchists need to read it, especially if they need some kind of, when they're talking to a statist Christian. There's a lot of firepower in this book that you can use to explain your side. There's a book called, I've got it right here on the desk. It's called The Early Christians in Their Own Words by Eberhard Arnold.
Ooh,
just all these, it's all early church quotes. And I'm talking about prior to Constantine, the first 400 years of the church. So Tertullian is one of my favorites. He's the stuff he quotes about the state, about the Roman Empire. He flat out said, we have no interest in your meetings. He even said, do I carry a flag? It's a rival to Christ. He says, I shun the voters booth.
Yeah.
He said, it's what y'all are doing is completely foreign to us. He was very vocal about how the early church was towards the state. And just reading that stuff has reinforced how I feel about Christian anarchy because.
Yeah. Well, I think, too, people really need to learn about their church history because Constantine, he's I think a lot of people don't realize he's actually a pretty polarizing figure, and he more or less instituted Christianity as the state religion, you know, prior to that, the church was heavily persecuted. Christians very often engaged in civil disobedience. They suffered greatly for it.
All the way to the point of death.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of people, you know, and then after Constantine, the church became the persecutors, you know,
right.
which shows you what happens when you give any sort of institution the power of the state. You know, they become very violent and vulgar, I think. But yeah, I would encourage a lot of Christians who really just believe we should be obedient to the state no matter what, and that's, you know, Jesus' command, Romans 13. I would encourage them to look into their own church fathers and history. You know, anytime someone quotes to me Romans 13, I try and tell them, don't tell me about Romans 13 unless you're willing to wrestle with Ephesians 6, which, if I remember correctly, says we fight not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers and authorities. And then he goes on. A lot of people misinterpret this verse, but he's literally saying the governmental authorities of his day. He says that is who we're fighting, these institutions that are heavily persecuting us, right? So so don't. I'll wrestle with Romans 13 if you're willing to wrestle with Ephesians 6, right? Like,
well, you just go to when Jesus, the temptation of Jesus. That right there tells you exactly who's behind man-made government.
Yeah, exactly.
1 Samuel 8, God warns us what happens when you ask for a king. You know, when Israel asked for a king, he laid it all out for them. This is what's going to happen, and it's still true today.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But yeah, and go listen to our podcast too. We've had some cool.
Where can we plug all your stuff? Where can we find you? Social media, all that stuff.
We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thebadroman.com is our website. All of our podcasts is on there. I have a growing blog on there. We invite listeners to the show to come on and write for the blog as well. You can find our podcasts on any of your platforms. Wherever you listen to your podcast, you're going to find The Bad Roman. And we've had some cool guests on there that we talk a lot about Romans 13. We talk about a lot of the early church. And I would, even if you don't listen to the podcast, like you were saying, go and study what the early church was saying prior to Constantine. It'll blow your mind. And like I said, it has really reinforced how I view the state. And I always take it back to if they were a lot closer to the situation than we are. And so I'm going to be more inclined to listen to what they were saying than today a pastor in today's church. That's so. Yeah. Check us out, and we are always happy to hear from people too. So you can send us an email at thebadromanpodcast@gmail.com or reach out to us through our website. We love the fan interaction, and we love talking to folks and getting some feedback from everybody. And it's been cool. It's been a lot of fun the way that people have latched onto, and it's really helped. This is their words. This is not me patting myself on the back. So it's really helped them because this is a subject that people struggle with, and that's what we're hoping to do, is to kind of give somebody a safe place, so to speak, so they're having these feelings. Like when I became an anarchist, I thought I was alone as a Christian anarchist, and it turned out there's a whole bunch of us out there. You can find them on social media.
Totally. Yeah, man. Well, thanks, Craig. This was an awesome conversation. Definitely go check out his podcast, The Bad Roman Podcast. It's very good. Peace.
Appreciate it, man.